next question I have in terms of the Australian startup scene, firstly, how do you feel? What's your overall feel for the startup scene in Australia, and how do we get to a point where we're the next Silicon Valley, or when moving towards that direction?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything stopping Australia from
being that?
From getting there? Yeah.
I mean, Silicon Valley is an interesting thing. So everyone talks about, and like, oh, we'd love Perth to be the next Silicon Valley. Like, we've got the weather, and and we do have an amazing environment in Australia and in Western Australia. But there's a lot of talk. I was watching a documentary or a film about compact computers the other day, and how long ago Silicon Valley has been around forever, and it's only recent years everyone's talking about Silicon Valley.
Sure.
And we want to be like that and that type of thing. So I think it will take a long time for any other city within Australia to get to that point. My understanding is Sydney is sort of leading the charge at the moment in that respect, based on recent reports. Perth, unfortunately, has fallen behind a little bit, but we're really trying to change that and make it a more attractive place for companies to do business and grow. But there's been lots of discussions about, should we position ourselves as a great launching pad, or do we grow a company to X size, and then when they're ready, it's okay for them to go out into the world and to build bigger offices in San Fran and London and other places, because maybe that is where the global opportunity is. However, we are in Perth, where I think the stat's something like we're within 2 hours of 60% of the world's the population time zone. I said that all wrong, but I think you know what I mean.
Sure.
So strategically with Asia and China, and we're very, very well positioned. And I think it's choosing the right products or the right businesses that make sense within this +8 time zone type vibe.
Sure.
That we could be something. I don't think we're going to be Silicon Valley, but I think we can be our own thing.
Okay.
It's sort of establishing what that is and how that works. I think we're not quite there yet.
Okay.
But I hope it comes, because I think it's an incredible country. It's an incredible place to be, and it is a great place to live and work and do business. So
I agree.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting kind of sentiment that gets thrown around. Oh, Perth can be the next Silicon Valley, and these sort of things. But I think you're right. We need to find our own identity, something that is true to the circumstance and the context.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, is there any other central hubs in the startup world? Now, thinking globally.
Mm-hmm.
Is it London? Is there something within our 2-hour time zone? Is it somewhere in Hong Kong? Or is there, where else can we look to for these startups and a hub for startups?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the States are kind of the one. So, Silicon Valley, New York, London, the big cities, of course. A really exciting place is Tel Aviv in Israel. I'm yet to go there, but I would love to go there.
Wow.
Singapore are doing a lot. I think there's some interesting places, and they've got some interesting sort of techniques that they're doing. So they're paying big companies or big startups to come in, scale-ups to come and work in their city and base their headquarters in their city, and that builds a talent pool and all that kind of stuff, which I think is something we could learn from here, because you want the talent to have the opportunity, and the businesses need the talent pool.
Sure.
So it's sort of that chicken or the egg problem. Do you bring the companies first, or do you bring the talent? And by paying those companies to come over and bring the talent with them, it creates you know, that
Yeah,
groundswell
cycle.
in the ecosystem.
Okay. So Tel Aviv, what's happening over there?
I don't know the ins and outs, but yeah, similar things to what I mentioned. Just really fostering that startup environment.
Okay.
I don't have specific stats
Sure.
or anything, but yeah, just
Something to look out for.
yeah.
Awesome.
And supposedly a very cool place to holiday anyway. So
Oh,
I'm keen to
okay,
go
okay.
there.
Two birds with one stone. That's
Yeah.
cool. I would like to also touch on Reconciliation Week, which is at the time of recording this is currently happening, and you've done some work with the inaugural National Dream Summit.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain to us, what is the Dream Summit, and what's the next steps?
Sure. So I'm doing work with Skills of Modern Age, and through that we were contracted through the Mindru Foundation and Generation One. They wanted to create something, a summit, a boot camp of sorts for Indigenous entrepreneurs. And the intent was that it's national, that it's not stepping on the toes or hindering anything else that's going on, but it's promoting and showcasing and celebrating all the fantastic work that's going on in the Indigenous entrepreneurial space. There's lots of organisations and lots of companies doing really cool stuff. So it's trying to bring it all together as one central point. So this is the first event which we're holding in September over in Sydney. There's a new place called the Sydney Startup Hub, which is home to a few of the big co-working spaces over there, so 10th Stream Labs and Stone and Chalk. So we'll be bringing together all the startup hubs, hopefully from around Australia. We'll be bringing in teams with Indigenous founders, and they don't have to be a tech-focused idea, but early stage, there's certain criteria that they have to meet. And we're trying to help them to develop and grow their ideas and channel them into, ongoing and opportunities beyond that program.
Wonderful.
So
yeah,
it's really exciting. We want to make it an annual event. So it is the first one. So we've got a lot to figure out, and we're securing sponsors and mentors and industry professionals and stuff. So it's a really cool thing to be a part of.
Okay. I mean, this is an interesting perspective in terms of Indigenous entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. Do you see a lot of that in WA?
Yeah, there's a huge amount of companies doing big things. Obviously, I don't think it's highlighted to the extent that it could be, I think, to the general public. But so that's what we want to try and do, is celebrate it more and highlight it more and support Indigenous entrepreneurs further.
Sure. Shift between perhaps a time where you weren't so entrepreneurial, mm-hmm. and what changed to where you are now, and what's the major differences?
To be honest, I think I've always been a bit of a crazy risk taker.
Okay.
Like even as a kid, I'd just potter around and make things and try and experiment with stuff, and I'm sure I drove my parents crazy. Like I was always busy, and always Mum just said busy, like that was me. So I think that sort of sense of just having a crack at something or having an idea and just trying to make it and see what happens, that's always sort of been something within me. But I'm not sure if there was really a turning point. There was definitely that events business that I talked about. I lost money on one of the events that I ran, and I was like, oh gosh, I've got to move out of home. I moved out of home at 18, and then I moved back in with my dad at like 22 or something like that. And to me, that was devastating. Like it was so it wasn't a huge amount of money in retrospect, but at the time I was just could not believe that I'd gone backwards. And that feels so, what's the word?
demoralizing, maybe?
Yeah, it's just demotivating. It's just, you're just
Sure.
like, crap, I worked so hard and that didn't work. And that sucks, but that also kind of fuels you. So that got me into investing in property, because I was like, no, I want to do this. I can still do this. I can pick myself up and dust myself off and do something else. So maybe that was a turning point where Dad once said to me, he said, poverty makes you hungrier. And I think that's true. It's when you get to rock bottom and you're like, oh, I want this even more now. So that was probably a pivotal moment.
Sure.
One of many, I'm sure.
Sure. I think that's a very defining moment, and thank you for sharing that, because we don't often share our failures.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that if we shouldn't lose sight of. We need to remember what that's like, because we can't really take anything for granted. And for myself, coming out of university, coming out of engineering school in the downturn of, WA,
It's tough.
It's tough. There's no jobs.
Yeah.
And, you do what you can to get by, working casual jobs or in a different industry and all sorts of things just to get by. And then when you do find that job that you really want, you go for it so much more. And then when you're there, you value it so much more. You go the extra mile. So I think that's really important in terms of just overall success of a lot of business people, is they've come from a defining moment.
Yeah.
That has motivated them, and they've not lost track of that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
you've got to let it drive you rather than knock you down.
Yeah.
You can be annoyed temporarily or like upset and that type of thing, but you've got to use it as fuel rather than.
I agree. So this kind of touches on one of my favorite idols is Dwayne Johnson, The Rock.
Mm-hmm.
And he always tells the story about how he had $7 in his pocket at his lowest point. He had just got dropped from a Canadian NFL team, and that was his dream. And he didn't even make it into the American NFL. It was a Canadian NFL, and he got dropped from there. So he had literally nothing in his bank account and didn't know what to do. And that's where he kind of built his whole story. He started working hard, started building connections, put in the long yards. But I mean, he's kind of my idol in that sense, and my motivator. But do you have any icons or models out there that you can share with the audience?
I guess I've got like the famous celebrity ones, and then I've got just personal ones as well. I've mentioned my dad a couple of times. He's just an absolute, he's a gun, and he's the most calm, level-headed. I've seen him go through some heavy, crazy stuff in business, in his personal life, and he just soldiers on. And I think that is a really, really admirable quality, to just, I think, break things down into bite-sized, manageable pieces. And I think that's a really, really clever way of approaching life. And I think it's something that just comes naturally to him.
Okay.
But I don't think that comes naturally to most people. So it's taking an overwhelming, crazy thing and breaking it down into tiny bits and just methodically ticking it off one by one. And I think that's a great way of approaching life and challenges.
So if you combine that with kind of your risk-taking nature, then you've got a good kind of formula there. So I'm getting a feel for the type of personality that works in startups and works in this kind of creative arena. Mm-hmm. What about the introverts? Have you had any success stories with introverted leaders, introverted entrepreneurs?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's that team in that building and the co-founders and all that kind of stuff. There's a place for every personality type, whether it's, in large corporates, in multinationals, or whether it's in small startups working out of a bedroom. Introverts have fantastic qualities. One of the greatest developers I've ever worked with is the most introverted person I've ever met, and really struggles to speak, really struggles to have conversations, but is just a brain and a half, and great problem solver. So I think it depends on what the application of that personality is, but there's always a place for those, the quiet achievers. That you don't have to be loud and out there and outgoing and sociable to be successful. If you want to get funding and you want to market your product and that kind of stuff, you might need to partner with someone who is.
Sure.
Because someone's got to be the voice.
Someone's got to be Steve Jobs and someone's got to be Wozniak.
Steve Wozniak, that's it. Yeah. So I think find that complementary person to work with.
So in looking for partners and business partners, and how do you go about finding potential business partners? Do you attend networking events? Do you attend specific things where there are events for actual people looking to invest, or how do you go about finding a good business partner?
I think when you go shopping and you try and look for something specific and it's almost impossible to find it. I kind of think the same way about network. That makes it sound like I just go hang out at stores all the time. That's not what I mean. But I just mean when you, rather than trying to find something right then and there, networking and being present and being involved is really, really important. And it's important for getting customers, it's important for investment, it's important for partners and co-founders and that type of thing, absolutely. So saying yes to opportunities, saying yes to events, even when you're so tired from work and you just want to go home and watch TV, just going to that event and meeting 3 people could be all the difference. Because you never know where something's going to come from or where a connection will happen. Trying to broaden your horizons and broaden your circle. So
I think so too. I think that little extra effort, you never know what can come off it. Come off a conversation. And so many things in my career have come from just chance meetings of different people. And it can snowball and get really good really quickly just by making those few connections. So I think that's really really interesting and something interesting to share. I mean, since we're sharing wisdom, we might close on this. Looking at the last sort of 5 to 10 years of your life, what would you tell a younger Chloe? What advice would you give a younger Chloe?
Gosh.
And while you think about it, maybe I'll give you my answer. And for a long time, it's one, don't waste time. Time is so valuable. Even if you spend half the amount of time that you're wasting on something constructive, that's still a really good amount of time that you've invested in developing yourself. And the other thing is to just trust yourself, just believe in yourself, to have a go, to make something. And that's kind of, 2 things that I would definitely I'm still trying to coach myself to do. And from my end, I think that's really my area that I've seen myself grow and develop as I've tried to address those things and implement some of those things. I've seen really good results. If I'm looking sort of forward and in terms of other things, don't get too bogged down in the details of how amazing or how terrible something is at that one moment. Because there's plenty of opportunities and more disappointments even to come around the corner. So don't get don't hold on too much to those things.
Yeah. I think they're great. I agree. There's so many things I would tell myself, but one big thing is definitely, what you said about those experiences and the turmoil, and when things seem like everything's falling apart or falling down or coming down on top of you, which does happen, and you think in the moment that it's the worst thing that can happen, and then something else comes and you're like, oh my gosh, how did this get to this point? Or and it can be completely external factors. It can be things in your personal life, things in your business world, and I've come to learn that those things will just happen, and you have to learn how to deal with them. And I think, preparing yourself and working through those in a logical, healthy way, and knowing that you will get through it is really important. The second thing is that I've noticed there's a direct correlation between how much I put in versus how much I get out. So, the financial rewards or the growth in my career or the growth in whatever I'm doing is directly correlated to how much effort or how much I've put into learning or developing myself, my skills, or going to those events or meeting people and that kind of thing. So put more in and you'll get more out, essentially.
Okay. Well, I mean, one thought that came to mind just then in terms of, okay, you're putting in effort, you're driving in a direction, but what about the actual direction itself?
Mm-hmm.
How have you found that, that direction? How would you guide yourself, your younger self, to find that direction, or what would you advise others to help them find their direction?
I'm probably the worst person to ask that question because I haven't found my direction, and I have way too many interests. Like I've just got so many things that I love and that I'm passionate about. I really struggle with direction. So hence why I've ended up in a portfolio career. But I think just staying true to yourself, you said about not wasting time. So absolutely invest your time, but I think investing in the right places. So if you know exactly who you are, exactly what you love, what you're passionate about, the impact you want to have in the world.
Thanks for listening to the first half
the types
of
of
this podcast.
tasks you
Keep an
like
eye
doing,
out
that
for the
kind of
second
thing.
half
Try and
coming
think
soon.
about how that all shapes up into something. And I still haven't really figured that out. Like I'm still working it out. I know I love business. I know I love working with entrepreneurs. I know I love, helping people to build their ideas and to be creative and that kind of stuff. So everything I do kind of sits around that space, but I wouldn't say I've got it landed or worked out yet.
Okay. Well, I think that's a great way to kind of approach it, is you have to first understand yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and then you will find a bit more clarity in the direction. And things evolve, you will stumble upon things as you follow that direction, that general direction. So that's awesome. And last but not least, I'd like to give you an opportunity to reach out to our audience. How can they contact you if they have questions, or how can they, where can they see you next? Are you writing some articles or anything that you want to plug? The floor is all yours.
No plugs as such. If you're an Indigenous founder and you've got a cool company, we'd love to see you at Dream Summit in Sydney. So the applications will be open soon. I don't know where I'll be next. That's my day-to-day story. But if anyone wants to get in touch, I'm on LinkedIn, or my website's chloecon.com. So they can hit me up there, and happy to respond.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Chloe. Thanks for your time and your perspective. It's refreshing and very, very knowledgeable. So thank you.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the PerthYP Podcast. You can find more episodes on our YouTube and LinkedIn pages at PerthYP. Until next time, keep listening, keep growing, and keep connecting.